In this episode, Australia's daring destroyers. The first colonists of Australia had to fight all the time. They faced heat, lack of water, flies, snakes, and even ostriches. And today, the Australians still cannot live without fighting. Every day they fight boredom, trying to conquer the waves. They created AC/DC, whose rock swept the world like a hurricane. In February 1942, Japanese aircraft attacked the city of Darwin in Australia. Japan was expanding its empire, mainly by occupying territories in Southeast Asia. Though Australia was not part of their plan, military bases of the United States and the Allies stationed on the Green Continent were undermining Japan's intentions to dominate the Pacific, and the Royal Australian Navy was actively involved in the Pacific War until the very end of World War II.
Following the end of the Second World War, moving into the Cold War, Australia still realized that it needed to have a defensive asset in its Navy, so it moved to bringing in a new generation of vessels, of which the Daring class destroyers were a member.
The Daring class was essentially designed as the Royal Navy's super destroyer. Australia decided to build 3 Darings, being Vampire, Vendetta and Voyager.
The British designed the Daring class, relying on their experience of using destroyers in World War II and the progress in arms development. The Australian-built destroyers were somewhat different from their British counterparts. In terms of their specifications, the Darings were similar to light cruisers. Total displacement, about 3,800 tons. Length, about 390 feet. Beam, about 43 feet. Draft, 13 feet. Armament. When commissioned, the Darings were equipped with versatile guns featuring the best rate of fire in the world. 6 4.45-inch Mark V guns mounted in 3 dual turrets. As for small caliber anti-aircraft guns, the ships had 6 1.57-inch Bofors autocannons. Torpedo armament. 1 5-tube 21-inch torpedo launcher. Anti-submarine armament. 1 3-barrel 12-inch Mark X anti-submarine mortar. The power plant consisted of 2 Foster Wheeler boilers and 2 English electric turbines and provided 54,000 horsepower. Maximum speed over 30 knots. Cruising range 3,700 nautical miles at 20 knots.
The Australian-built Darings were the first all-welded construction vessels, warships built in Australia.
The ship incorporated all the best design features developed during World War II.
In the early 1970s, the Darings were fitted with surface-to-air missiles. Despite this, they remained mainly artillery ships, and they were the last ones of their kind. The destroyers' main turrets were their pride. 4.45-inch versatile guns could fire 24 rounds per minute and showed themselves to be advantageous during World War II. The Darings were equipped with the QF Mark V version of these guns, which was a post-war upgrade. The turrets had a distinctive shape and made the destroyers easy to recognize.
This is the gun bay, or gun turret A on the Daring class destroyers. This is where the shells and the cartridges were assembled before being sent up to the guns. This is an incredibly challenging and very dangerous place to work on the ship. It was confined, and as you can imagine, you've got high explosives being sent into this room, so there was the danger of explosion or fire. And if that weren't difficult enough, this bay actually rotated as the gun above rotated. Sometimes the rotation would occur without any warning and any indication of where it was going to go. So you could be in the middle of trying to assemble a shell, and all of a sudden the entire bay would move and you'd have to shift with it.
The ships essentially served around Southeast Asia under the Southeast Asian Treaty Organisation and often spent a lot of time in Singapore. Essentially the only vessel which saw service out of the class was the Vendetta, which did a short period of time in Vietnam.
An Australian contingent of about 50,000 men participated in combat operations in Vietnam, and Australia got involved in this war several years before the United States interfered in the conflict. At first, 30 Australian military advisors were sent to South Vietnam, but a couple of years later, a several thousand-strong military force was deployed there. They required supplies, which were brought by transport convoys from Australia. Darings were among the ships protecting them. Despite the fact that Australia was officially at war, it was hardly felt aboard escort ships. Of course, the service wasn't anything like a pleasure trip. However, one of the major concerns for the destroyer crews was to win the Gloucester Cup, the main award.
HMAS Vampire's Operations Center. It's directly below the wheelhouse. The nickname for this room is called the Bat Cave. That's because HMAS Vampire's nickname was the Bat. It looked a lot like a cave, and at the time that Vampire was operational, Batman, and particularly the TV show, was a very popular thing. So it was given the nickname based on that information.
The Darings were a top ship. They were a very friendly ship. Or especially Vendetta was. Everyone in the crew used to get along together. There was hardly any ever fights.
This tragedy left a deep wound in the hearts of Australian sailors, but soon their life returned to normal. Exercises, regattas, and patrol duties. Many veterans remember their years of service aboard the Australian Darings as the best and most carefree time in their life, though the destroyers went on serious combat missions a couple of times. In other respects, the most dangerous challenges that the Daring's crews faced were visits to local bars, and the consequences were comical rather than sad. Friendly and well-knit crews of the Daring-class destroyers were very highly trained and were rewarded by the command of the Royal Australian Navy on multiple occasions. In the 1980s, when new wave music began conquering the world, the Australian destroyers from the rock and roll era became history. Voyager and 83 members of her crew rested at the bottom of the sea. Vendetta was scrapped.
She was scrapped. She was sent there and sent to Taiwan and basically ended up as a razor blade, you know, all the steel. you know, I wish they'd sat there and sunk it as a reef, but they weren't sinking ships back then for reefs. There was still money in steel.
Luck was kind to Vampire alone. She was decommissioned in 1986, but remained intact. This museum ship, located in Sydney's Darling Harbour, has the right to be considered a memorial to all Australian darings. She is the last of them.
And all the parts that went off Vendetta are now on Vampire, which is the museum ship you just looked at. There's probably, I'd say there's a good 40% of Vendetta still floating on Vampire.
So I'm very glad that they saved HMAS Vampire from the scrap heap, because she does represent an era of the Navy of which I'm very proud. The privations of steamships and the great spirit of the crews.
So, welcome back everyone, and welcome back to new ships. And today I have pretty awesome ship for everyone who's living in Australia, and especially the Sydney. What we have here, guys, is just amazing. HMAS Vampire was a V-class destroyer of Royal Navy and Royal Australian Navy, RAN, launched in 1917 as a HMS Wallace. The ship was renamed and commissioned into the RN later that year. So what we have here, it's a tier 3 destroyer, guys, with which you can see here the length. It's pretty small, tiny ship, 95.1 meters. Proportion 27,000 horsepower, maximum speed it's only 34 knots. Unfortunately, main guns 102 millimeters, main armor 4x1. AA defense, we have some Bofors guns, some 20 millimeters, and one single torpedo launchers 533 millimeters. And if you see this a Darling class destroyer, they all had actually only one single torpedo launchers, guys. So that's also the reason this is a tier 3 destroyer. But it's a very famous, it's very famous in Australia, this destroyer. Vampire was loaned to the RAN in 1933 and operate just before the World War II. And you can clearly read all the text, guys. Personally, I would just like to share with you some pictures. She looks pretty awesome, I tell you. It will also, at the end of this video, put full screen pictures with this new tier 3 Australian destroyer. Not quite, of course, it's not quite daring destroyer, but I hope and I really wish that in the near future we will see the daring destroyer in our game. But this is not quite it. It is a tier 3 after all. She is good looking. Of course, she kind of lacks in torpedo power. Honestly, it's kind of, I don't know exactly what it's. We will go talk about torpedoes and armor in just a couple of seconds. Before I will just take a closer look about the pictures, guys. So here we have her. Keep this in mind, this is super stats only, so our game can still change some stats and so on. So keep that in mind. Take everything I said with a pinch of salt. Tier 3, hit points 9,500, plating 3 to 10 millimeters. That's not a whole. Main battery, I just told you. Fire range 10.1 kilometers. It's not bad actually. The fire range, it's all right. HE damage 1500, AP damage 1700, but for H it's pretty big. HE damage for those low caliber guns is not bad. Reload time every 5 seconds, and this is without any captain's perk and so on. So 5 seconds, it's the stock configuration. 180-degree turn time, it's 18 seconds, which is not bad, really good. Maximum dispersion 91 meters is bloody good. AP and HE and AP velocity, I'm talking about the speed, 805. It's not how should I say terrible, it's not perfect, but it's fine for this tier. It's probably even more than fine. Torpedo, you only have one torpedo launcher with 3 torps, and torpedo range is 6 kilometers. Torpedo speed is 53 knots. It's kind of a bad, to be honest, with the speed of the torps. Reload time is 62 seconds. Maximum damage 10,000. Now I do believe this is for maximum damage a torp. It's pretty much for if it's for its tier, I honestly believe. So you can do roughly maximum 30,000 damage if all 3 torpedoes will hit. Maximum speed 34 knots. It's not something amazing, but it's all right. Turning radius on the other hand, it's just bloody fantastic. Just look at this. This is the most ridiculous. 520 meters turning radius. It's amazing. Rudder shift 2.5 seconds. It's also amazing. Air detection 2 kilometers. It's just absurd how good this air detection is, and surface detection is 6.3. Now, which basically means without camo and without how should I say the concealment expert, you cannot invisible torps. You still have to but with, let's say, with camo and captain's concealment, you can actually ninja torp, you know. That's the thing. So please guys, what do you think about this small ship? Not something big, but I honestly believe if you're from Australia, I honestly believe it's kind of important for you, because I honestly believe this is the second Australian ship, or in our game it will be how should I say it's like Perth, you know, the Perth, the same captain. So if you have a Perth captain already, you can train with this ship. That's what I'm trying to say. So guys, I really hope that Wargaming decide to in the near future to give us the Daring destroyer. I would be more than happy to purchase it, because that destroyer, in my opinion, of course, it's different tier and different story, but it will be very nice to race it. So please let me know what you think about this small destroyer. I honestly believe that it's pretty interesting, and it's always welcome. Not something big, but if you love your country, Australia, and if you love the low tier, and probably you like to have a, you know, a ship that you can seal club. Probably I do believe so. So yeah, it could be fun. Please let me know in a comment below what you think about this ship. And always, captains, take care, and fair seas, and have a good one.